V'ha'ish Moshe, and the man Moses, haya anav ma'od, was very humble. Mikol ha'adam al sha'er al pnei ha'adama, from any person on the face of the earth. That was a line in chapter 12 of our Torah reading. It is the only time that Moses is described. We don't know what he looked like, other than the fact that there was light that emerged from his face upon returning from Mount Sinai. We don't know how tall he was. We don't know color of his hair. And we only know this one quality of character, humility. What is humility? And why and how does it define Moses? Part of the answer is the context in which that line is found. Chapter 12 of Numbers. There, as it begins, his siblings, older than him, Aaron and Miriam, are having a conversation. It seems to be in front of others, in which they are discussing Moses and his wife. It's not so clear what they're saying about his wife. What is clear is the second part, which is that they say, Miriam says, this Moses, he thinks he's so great, but God talks to us also. And now God says to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, I want to have a talk with you. Come on in to my Ohel Moed. And then God says, Moses, all right, step out. I want to just talk to Miriam and to Aaron. And he says to them, you know, I have other prophets. I talk with them in dreams and in visions. Only Moses do I speak peh la peh, mouth to mouth. And then Miriam is punished. Miriam, and not Aaron, but Miriam is punished with a quality of leprosy. And Aaron will then say to Moses, Moses, look at your sister, her dead skin. Pray to God on behalf. And Moses recites to God a remarkably short and effective prayer. Ana el na rafa na la. Please, if it be your will, heal her, and she is healed. And so to return to the question, what is humility and how is it manifest in Moses? And how is that humility connected to the experience of God being on a far more refined level? And so what I'd like to do in a very short time is explore it imaginatively as Aaron, with Aaron describing at the end of this little tale where his sister has now been healed, what and how is Moses to him, and how is Moses humble? Moses is my little brother. We didn't really grow up together. He grew up in the palace, and I and my sister Miriam grew up among slaves. Moses, didn't marry one of us. He married a woman from Midian, a Cushite. But that's not what was bothering Miriam. What was bothering Miriam, despite what the rumor mills say, was not that Moses held himself out to be too good to marry a former slave. That's what people were saying. But what bothered Miriam was exactly the opposite. What bothered Miriam is that Moses, when he came down from Mount Sinai, has never been the same. You know, in public he now wears a mask, a veil, because there's this quality of light about him. But more, he seems to have distanced himself from his wife too, as if he's always a holy man, as if he's always on the ready to encounter God. And that's what she was saying. I'm in the middle. I was listening. I did not cut her off. I didn't say to her, how dare you say that? My way is the way of peacemaking. I was listening. And in that regard, supporting her and her support for Tzipporah, Moses' wife. What was surprising to us was how God said that he wanted a private conversation with us. In some regards, it only proved Miriam's point. God doesn't only speak to Moses. God speaks to Miriam and to me, Moses' older brother and sister. But what was remarkable was how Moses responded. First to God. When God says, Moses, leave the room, Moses leaves. And more, when I say to him, pray on behalf of your sister, he doesn't pause. In that regard, there is this remarkable quality about my younger brother. He who grew up in the palace, he who grew up as if he was royalty, admittedly has a quality of gravitas about him. That quality of inner strength has allowed him to lead the people somewhat as a stranger among us. But he's not a stranger among us. He, when he learned of his connection to we who were slaves, stood forward and even killed on behalf of a slave who was being beaten. That's why he had to run. Moses always identified with his lowly status while maintaining this quality of dignity and strength. But it's a dignity and strength that knows his power, but never being about him. He told me the story about how when God said to him, Moses, I have a job for you. He said, God, you got the wrong guy. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 5 times at that burning bush. You wouldn't know it by his speech. You wouldn't know it by his leadership. But you would know it by his ongoing sense of service. It was never about Moses. Moses, when he appeared before Pharaoh with me, stood tall and stood strong and stood as a vessel for God. There was this quality that I see in my younger brother of strength, of enormous strength, and enormous humility. It is not about him. It is about how he can be God's vessel. And that's how I understand this tale. For indeed, what is distinctive about Moses is his ability to empty himself of his own sense of, am I important? Are people caring about following me? He is focused to a great degree on God. But one more piece. He couldn't do it alone. You see, just before this conversation with Miriam, it was Moses at the low point of his life. Why? Because the people were saying, our stomachs yearn for the tasty fish and cucumbers and onions of Egypt. Moses had done this enormous sacrifice of himself to bring the people to a better tomorrow, to lead them to a promised land, to lead them to a sense of they too having a relationship with God. And what were the people concerned about? Their stomachs. In that moment, Moses said, why am I doing this? God, if they don't see a purpose, don't let me go on. I'm not their parent. I can't feed them. I can't care for them. I wish to be dead. And what was God's answer? Moses, I will take from you your spirit and place it on 70 elders. God did not say to Moses, I will make 70 elders prophets. He said, Moses, I will take from you, from your power, from your light, from your own prophecy and place it on them. And that alleviated Moses' concern. He was no longer alone. He saw that the best were stepping forward to be among those 70, and that Eldad and Medad continued to prophesy. For Moses' greatest moment, and he would never become depressed again in that way, was the recognition that he was not alone, but the people shared the vision and more, the willingness to serve God, to be vessels for God. Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, Moses was not alone. Could he only imagine that we gather together today in this moment of celebration of Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of Moses, in which our ancestors teach us that Moses was but God's vessel for the words that echoed among us. May we see ourselves too as strong. May we see ourselves as the children of royalty, the children of God. But may we see ourselves as able to serve and thereby to deepen our own quality of humility. May we compare ourselves not to others, but to you, God, who calls us to be our best. May we follow the example of Moshe. Amen.